This is the second part of the video that deals with purchase orders. This is where we left off in the previous video, right? We have created a new purchase order, which we don't have a number yet for, but we do know that this purchase order is coming from us to the supplier, Olympic Protective Gear in Atlanta. And one item that we wanted to buy from this vendor is off-road helmet. 60 units, $25 each, and it should be delivered to my Miami plant or Miami distribution center. And actually you can see when we entered all information about this item, at the bottom part of the screen there is details about item. It's also collapsible, as you can see. I can collapse and expand that. So right now it shows me all information about this item that I purchased, right? It says that it's an off-road helmet, the price 60 units, right? Units of issue each means I order them by count, counting every unit. Gross price is $25, and here is my total for that specific item that I'm ordering. So apparently 60 units times $25, that gives you $1,500. But I'm not done. From the same supplier, Olympic Protective Gear, I want to order another unit, which is also helmet, but this is a road helmet. So let's go through the same exercise. Remember that the most important part is this one, right? It's the material ID, the universal, the product code, if you want. Okay, so that's how system identifies the material. That's the most important number. Okay, so let's click on second line, and again I can either hit F4 or use that button right here. So let's click, and alright, I am going to again search for HAVA, right? Trading goods. Remember what trading goods are? Trading goods are materials or items that I buy from my suppliers and do not do any work on them. So these are primarily for resale, right? Road helmets, for example, or off-road helmets. I buy them from the company that manufactures them. I store them, and if my customers who order bikes typically or bike parts also want to buy a helmet from me, then I'm selling them this finished helmet. So it's purely for resale. I don't do any additional work on this helmet. That's what HAVA means, trading goods. I'm not doing any manufacturing. So HAVA, I'm searching in the category of trading goods. And materials, again, I'm going to search for anything that ends in my ID, 002. And you should obviously use your ID. So I typed star and my ID that I used to log into the SAP. So start search. And it gives me the list of all items. I already ordered off-road helmet, this one right there. So this one is going to be road helmet. Double click, and you can see that it populated the ID. I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. Hit enter several times possibly. Okay, so this is my first. Enter, and immediately I have the same action, right, that I saw before. First of all, it tells me that, hey, this is a road helmet. It's sold by units, so each is the standard units of issue count. And right there is a warning for me that we don't know where this item should be shipped or plant. Okay, so I go to plant and I do the same step as I did before, right? I'm ordering from my supplier for my Miami distribution center. So click on this button and pick Miami distribution center right there. And if I hit enter, it says Miami DC and net price. Right? We must know how much we're going to pay per unit. So suppose it's the same price for road helmets as for off-road helmets, so I type 25. You may have this price already in the system, actually, in which case, if the item is set up with the price will pop up in this list, of course, right? And the system will not ask you to enter the price because price is already there. In my case, price wasn't there, so I had to type it myself. Alright, and the next part, obviously, enter quantity. So just like before, I must specify how many units I order. So suppose I'm ordering 150 units. So I type 150, hit enter. And the next part is, there are no error messages for me highlighted in red, but there is a yellow warning for me that basically says, is it reasonable to expect these items to be delivered a day from now? Well, I'm going to change that. So click on the date selector, and pick 2 weeks from now, right there. And now I hit enter. So apparently there are no more warning messages, so technically I'm done. But let's review what happened. Okay, so I'm ordering 2 different item types from my vendor in Atlanta, Georgia. And over here in this part at the very bottom, item details, I can collapse or expand it. It gives me pretty much details of what is ordered and all of the financials. So for example, in the tab conditions, I can see that right now I'm looking at road helmet that I just entered, line item number 20. $25 each. I order 150 of them, so the subtotal for that item should be $3,750. I can switch to my line item number 1, and it updates the view. Obviously, it's a different item, off-road helmet. I order 60 of them. Price per unit is 25, so this is my subtotal. But what is my total? Let's go back to the header. So I'm going to collapse this item detail section. Okay, and I'm going to expand the header section. So in my header, here is the address of my organization, the buyer organization, right? And conditions, let's go to conditions, tab conditions. That is my total for the entire order. It shows me that I am going to buy, I'm going to have to pay this supplier $5,250. So that's a total across both lines, right? If you remember, one of them was $1,500, another was $3,750. So the sum is $5,250. Okay, so this is an overview. So at that point, I'm pretty much ready to submit the order, right? And all I have to do is say save. So there is a button, it has an icon on that, this old-fashioned disk, right? So I'm going to click on the save button, and you can see that everything clears out, right? I don't have any totals anymore. There is no vendor. If I look at the item overview, line 1, line 2, what used to be there, now it's all gone. And SAP communicates that to me at the bottom, that says, this message says standard purchase order was created under the number 45, whole bunch of zeros and 1. So that means that now, formally, I have already entered this order into the system, and hopefully this order is electronically communicated to my supplier, if the supplier, of course, is connected to my system via the electronic communications medium. Otherwise, I would have a button somewhere here that would say, print this order, and it will come out of the printer, so I will have to physically mail my order to the vendor. So we're done with part 1. We just created a purchase order and saved it in the SAP system. Let's go back to the top menu. How do I do that? Well, I click on this button that says exit. So I exit this screen. I just created the purchase order, right? So let's take a look at the steps. So this step is done. Purchase order is created and saved, or sent maybe to my vendor. So the next step is for me to acknowledge the inventory receipt when the inventory shows up at my doors. Okay, so let's pretend that now we're working at the warehouse. This part, by the way, was done by purchasing employees in my purchasing department. Okay, so right now, actually, I'm going to try to model the situation when inventory comes to my warehouse, and I formally receive that and acknowledge the receipt by entering something in my system, SAP. Right, so let's go back. So I'm going to close purchase order, and I'm going to close purchasing. Okay. Now, when I'm receiving the materials, the next step would be inventory management. That's every time when I receive inventory or send inventory from my warehouse to the production floor. So let's click on this item and expand it. Okay. Inventory management. As you can see, I can record goods movement, materials document, etc., etc. So clearly when I receive inventory, that's goods movement, right? goods are coming into my company. So I expand goods movement, and obviously it's a goods receipt that is sent from my vendor, and that is a good receipt that must be related to the purchase order, right? The only reason why things show up at my warehouse brought by truck is because I previously bought them from my vendor. So goods receipt for the purchase order. I'm going to expand that. And one of them says goods receipt for purchase order. So let's double click on this one, and it shows up the screen. Now right now the screen is empty. Okay, so I must actually find my purchase order. So let's try that. Alright, so goods receipt for the purchase order, and this field, if I click on this field, I don't know, I have no idea what this field is for. So I'm going to hit F1 button so that the system will tell me purchase order number. If you remember in the previous step, then we created the purchase order. At the bottom of the screen, SAP communicated to us that the order is saved and there was a number 45, bunch of zeros and 1. So technically speaking, what I can do is enter. If I recorded that somewhere, I can just type this number over here, 4500, but I don't remember how many zeros, quite honestly. So I'm going to have to find that purchase order in the system among other orders that may be there. So I'm going to click on that button. If you remember, this is search, or I can use F4. So let's do the search. Purchase order document, and you can see that I have many different ways how I can search the purchase order, right? So purchase order per vendor. I know who is the vendor, right? It's Olympic Protective Gear. Purchase order per vendor. And right now my vendor is already selected there. Okay, well, because I didn't log in, but if I did log out and then later log in again, after I saved my purchase order, that number would not be there, so I would have to search for it. Luckily, this vendor is populated right there already. So I'm going to say start searching, and there is my purchase order. Okay, so I specified this vendor, and right now I have only one purchase order for that vendor in the system. And this is my number, which I couldn't recall, 45, a lot of zeros and 1. So I'm going to double click on that number, and it's immediately populated in my purchase order number field. So all I have to do really is hit enter, and there you go. It immediately populates my screen. So where is this information coming from? Well, this, remember in the previous step when we saved the purchase order and it generated us the purchase order number, that was committed to the memory, right? That was recorded into the database. So what happened right now is I'm sitting here in Newport News, Virginia, and this information all recorded somewhere in the database, which actually is hosted for us by University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. Okay, so what happened is when I submitted my purchase order to the SAP, this program that I'm looking at right now, SAP, sent the request over the internet to the server in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, requesting the details of my purchase order number 45 bunch of zeros 1. Okay, and that information came back over the internet and it populated my screen. So you can see how distributed system like that works. Information is saved probably like 1,000 miles from here, but it travels instantly over the internet. And I can view this purchase order obviously at any place. I can be in Europe right now or in Australia. That would be just the same as long as I have internet connection. Okay, so I'm going to receive the goods, at least acknowledge the goods. So in this case, I'm going to take a simplistic view actually. I will assume that the truck shows up at my warehouse and it carries precisely what I have ordered. It carries 60 units of off-road helmets, and it carries 150 units for road helmets, and I don't have a problem with these items, meaning that none of them are defective, nothing is missing, so I'm completely happy. I'm ready to accept this shipment. Okay, so a couple of things that I have to do. So I'm going to assume that I will accept 60 units of item 1 and 150 units of item 2. I have to click OK. OK means that I have checked items and there are no issues, so I'm ready to accept them. But also what I have to do is I have to specify over here where exactly in the warehouse I put my items. slog field, which means stocking location. If you remember, we discussed that in class. Stocking location is, I can imagine my warehouse to be subdivided into separate sections. Okay, so here is the part of the warehouse where I keep my trading goods, for example. Here's the part where I keep my finished bikes. Here's the part where I keep my raw materials such as handlebars, seats, frames, etc., etc. So I must specify stocking locations. So let's click on this button, and you can see that in my Miami warehouse I have 4 different locations. I have a section for returns, bikes coming back from my customers. I have a section for trading goods, which is my helmets, right? Miscellaneous, whatever that means. It can be things that I use in production, but not necessarily directly in my items, such as, for example, buckets, mops, printer supplies, etc., etc. So I don't use them to make bikes, but I use them to run the company. And finished goods, obviously my finished bikes. So clearly I have to pick this one, trading goods. Okay, and this is probably a bug in the software, but over here if I try to click on the OK, nothing happens. So the recommendation from SAP, if this line is disabled, then just collapse detail section, and then it becomes available. Apparently it's some sort of the bug that they didn't fix. So I'm going to do the same thing. Click OK on my off-road helmet. And I'm going to place that in the same section of the warehouse, right? Stocking location. I have to pick the one for the trading goods. So hit F4 or hit this button, help, right there, and trading goods. And that's it pretty much, right? Procedure of receiving inventory and acknowledging inventory is not very complicated. I'm just saying, yep, things are here, they're in good conditions. And after that, when I acknowledge the receipt of the goods, I have to save that also in the database. So I click on this icon, save post, and you can see that it clears up the screen. Just one second. Yep, it clears up the screen. So purchase order number is gone, items are gone, it's all clear, and it says material document number 5 bunch of zeros 10 is posted. Note that it's a different document, right? So every step of the way, what I'm doing with my within my purchasing process, so let's go back. Every step of the way is an event by itself. So therefore, they have to be recorded separately. So far, I did 2 steps, right? I placed the purchasing document, purchase order with my vendor. It gave me the ID for this document. And now, when these items arrive to the warehouse, I also acknowledge the receipt of these items. And that is a different event. It's linked to my previously placed purchase order, no doubt about that, but that's an event in and of itself. So therefore, it was assigned a completely different, dependent but different ID. Okay? So that concludes my second part. Now I have to go out of this screen to the main menu. And next video will explain last couple of steps, the accounting piece. How we receive and record inventory, and then how we send the payment on the invoice that we have received from our vendors. Okay, so I'm going to stop this section right now.